There are many entrepreneurs who start with a business plan, a market analysis, and a carefully mapped out strategy. And then there's the rest of us. We start with a skill, a product, a craft, or an idea. We get good at making something, solving something, or creating something. Then one day we realize that being good at the work and being good at the business of the work are two very different things. My guest today understands that difference firsthand. Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to The Reluctant Entrepreneur. I am your host, Mike Conrad. Pape is an artist, designer, maker, creative business strategist, and founder of Gamify Business. After more than 20 years building a creative business, including custom work connected with major entertainment brands, Paul began helping other creative professionals understand business in a language that actually makes sense to them. His approach uses gaming concepts, RPG language, and creative frameworks to explain pricing, marketing, client relationships, planning, and growth. In other words, he helps creative entrepreneurs stop feeling like they are playing someone else's game and start building a business that fits the way they think. And the games will begin right now. Stick around. Paul Pape, I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Thanks for agreeing to be my guest today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. I think it should be a lot of fun.
I think so too. So, Paul, before we get into Gamify Business and all of that, take us back to the beginning. Were you always entrepreneurial, or did entrepreneurship find you through your creative work?
Yeah, I'd love to say that I was always entrepreneurial, but the fact of it is I, to this day, hate charging money for things. I'd rather just do it all for free, but we live in this weird economy where you have to pay for things. So
ultimately,
no,
yes.
Yeah, right. No, I actually started off in theater as an actor who was then told pretty quickly that that's not a career for me, and then got into design. And so design is actually where I found my sweet spot, got my degrees in that. And then as soon as I got my graduate degree, I'm not kidding, like 2 weeks later, I quit being a scenic designer after some really good advice from a guy who was a professional scenic designer. And then started my own company, my first company that week with a product that I had invented doing the scenic design work, and then kind of fell into entrepreneurship that way. Yeah.
Before we dive too far into your journey, let me get a wide shot here so my audience can see that you are standing in front of a what looks like a bar, and that's not a virtual background. That is a real background.
It's tangible.
It's tangible. You can touch it. Yeah, and from time to time you can probably take a swig out of one of those bottles back there.
Yes.
What led you to create that version of a persona? Bring the tie-in for me between kind of the bar concept and what you actually do for your clients.
So with Gamify Business, we are creating a role-playing game, and we're role-playing with your real life and your real business. But it's not really a game. We're just trying to help you to understand processes and the way business runs, but in a language that you already get. So that's gaming. And with a role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons, the place where everybody meets is the tavern. And when I got into doing this as the game master / barkeep, I wanted to make sure that I was approaching it from a point of view that was of service and not of like a leader, because I don't want to come into a business and take over. I'm really there just to kind of give the advice. And that's really what the tavern and the barkeep persona is all about. And so in an RPG, like a Dungeons and Dragons game, all of the warriors, wizards, and whatever, they show up and get a pint. And then while they're doing that, the barkeep tells them of the next adventure. And so I thought that would be the best persona for me to take on here with Gamify.
You spent a lot of years as a maker, artist, designer, fabricator, even before that, actor, or at least aspiring actor. That says a lot about your personality and the way your brain is wired. When did you first realize that your creative talent had become a business, or at least could become a business?
I think it's probably like right after I got out, like I said, out of grad school. I was working on a project, and I had to for scenic designers, I don't know if you know much about the design process, but when you're doing scenic design, you have to build a model. It's a scale version of something so that when you hand it off to the shop, they have a really good idea of what it's going to look like. And I was working on a show called I Am My Own Wife, and in it, there's a lot of furniture. And of course, I did this to myself. I'm the designer, but I had to hand cut 100 tiny chairs, basically. And back then, we didn't have lasers or 3D printers. It was all done by hand. And so I was sitting there cutting out cardstock and coloring them with watercolor and markers. And after about the 50th one, I go, there has got to be a better way to do this. And so that's actually what led to the first business that I ever had, which was Pop Out Furniture. And from there, I was like, I've got a lot of these ideas. And as a designer, you got to constantly ideate. So that was like, if I could take these ideas that I keep popping up in my head and actually do something with it, I think I could be, one, happy, and two, profitable. And so that's kind of like, well, like, how do I do this? My dad always, he had a bunch of Pearl Vision franchises when I was growing up. And so I knew like kind of like how to run a business vaguely from that aspect of it. But then when I jumped in, it was like, there was no safety net because, one, I was inventing a product that didn't exist, had to find all the machines and people to help me manufacture it. And then I was trying to get it into a market that didn't know that they needed it. And so it really was like a jumping with 2 feet, but I love the challenge of it. And to me, it is a game, and the game is, trying to get market discoverability and then trying to convince people that they need to have it without overly selling it and all of these things. And so I think that's really where the entrepreneurial spirit came from, was really just the desire to see something that I had created basically take on a life of its own. And ironically, within 5 years of that, I had to also watch the first entrepreneurial idea die, which is probably one of the best lessons an entrepreneur can learn, is not just how to start a business, but how to end one.
Yeah, that's for sure. And unlike your dad's business journey, which was franchise based, so when he bought a Pearl Vision franchise, it came with a lot of binders, standard operating procedures. The corporation did a lot of the marketing and advertising and all of that. You had very much a blank slate, right? You didn't have, someone didn't hand you like, okay, this is what you do. A, B, C, D, E, right? You just had to kind of figure it out on your own, right?
Yeah, it's instead of A, B, C, D, it was A, F, G, squirrel, tree out in the backyard. It's everything. And they don't ever put it to you in a linear fashion. It's literally in a bowl in front of you, all mixed together. And you've got to sort every single bit out yourself with no instructions. And
yes, kind of like a jigsaw puzzle where every piece is the same color, right?
I was just going to say that. I was literally going to say that. Yeah. It's exactly what it is. Yeah.
And time and perseverance and trial and error are really the only ways to kind of get through it. And you just hope that there's a few more good decisions than bad. But there certainly, at least in my case, was a lot of bad decisions. I just happened to have a couple of great ones that netted out all the bad ones, barely. Was there a point where you discovered that being good at a craft just wasn't going to be enough to keep the business healthy?
Oh, absolutely. And it's actually cyclical. And that's one of the things that I really like to make sure that my clients and the people who are talking to me understand, is that business ebbs and flows like the sea. There's always going to be cycles to things. The most recent cycle with Pape Designs, which is my primary business as well as Gamify, was after the pandemic. During the pandemic, a lot of businesses had issues, but with the creative side of it, since everybody was stuck in their homes and got tired of looking at the stuff that they had around them, the art business really flourished. And so during the pandemic, I was doing really, really well. And it was after the pandemic, once everyone started returning back to work and life was getting back to normal, as much as we can say that, that's when I saw
the new normal.
The new normal. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah. But I saw like the worst drop off of business that I had seen in 20 years.
Wow.
And it was eye opening. And fortunately for me, because you do see things, what do they say? Time creates a much better picture of what's going on in your life. And so I was able to look back and see these ebbs and flows, but I noticed that this one was almost like a tidal wave. So I was like, okay, so let's start planning now with something else that can help to take over or at least further this thing. Because like I said before, I lost one business early on in my career, and I knew what that felt like. So with this other one here, I was like, okay, I can see that there's something happening here. I should be paying attention to it. And then what do they say? Don't plant a garden when you're starving. You got to plant it before that point. And so that's really what I did with Gamify. I was realized like, okay, I'm seeing the writing on the wall. Where can we transition to while still keeping that other business going?
What does Pape Designs do?
So Pape Designs is a design and fabrication studio. Basically, I design and fabricate custom collectibles, or I make the things that people want that they can't get anywhere else. And that's actually what led to my nickname of Santa for Nerds.
Yeah.
And that actually is what led to my first TED Talk, which is it's TEDx, but it's called Santa for Nerds. And it's
By the way, I do have
envy,
a lot of envy flowing through my veins right now, because one of my bucket list goals someday is to do a TED Talk. I do a lot of public speaking, but never on a red dot. And I would love to do that at some point. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
That's a stage I look forward to being on someday.
I have my second one happening in October. So
wow! Now I'm even more envious.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it's going from
chat about this after the show here, but
I don't know if it's going from envy to a little bit of hate now. So I don't. But
I'll take it.
I'll hold back on that. What was or what were some of the business lessons that you had to learn the hard way? That's almost a rhetorical question, right? But obviously all of them, right? But what are the ones that stand out looking back?
I think one of the biggest ones that took me the longest is I am stubborn, and when you get in kind of like in your own way, you tend to stay there a really long time. But I think one of the hardest ones that I had to learn was that I had to quit selling the products that I was making and start selling the artist or the creative behind it. This works really well in creative-based industries. Pape Designs has been around over 20 years. I don't have a single product. I don't sell anything. What I do is I sell the idea that I can make you something.
Yeah.
And what was happening was that I was putting a lot of effort into showcasing all the things that I made for and we're talking 3,000 different designs over the course of 20 years. But what took me about 12, 13 years to realize was that people would pay me more if they knew that they were actually helping out Paul, because my level of work is really high. And so people would equate it to being machined into a factory somewhere in China or whatever. And I'm just getting it to them. And it's like, no, it's actually one dude sitting in his basement handcrafting all of this stuff. And so once I started actually putting myself out there, I was able to actually put a 0 on the back of it. That was probably the biggest lesson that I had to learn. The other one is one that is constantly repeated to me, which is your customers are not in the room with you. You must go to where the customers are. And as a person who works in a studio in his basement of his home, I'm very comfortable with where I'm at. I like all my stuff is here, but I hate trying to go out there and market. I really want people to come to me because I'm brilliant. Whatever. Like I think that's what every entrepreneur thinks.
Once they see your place, they'll know, right?
Exactly. But the reality is that no, your customers are not in your basement, and if they are, they probably want out. So the idea is to go out there and actually find the people. So I think those are the two hardest lessons that I've faced as an entrepreneur. The rest of them, they have their issues. I mean, obviously, if you're not great at marketing or bookkeeping or whatever you're not good at, it's going to really be amplified when you're trying to do it on your own. But I'd say those two lessons were the hard ones for me to really
yeah, you really had to differentiate yourself from a Chinese-produced collectible factory to an artisan, right? So,
yeah.
And if you can do that, that's a hard transition, but if you can do that, your value just skyrockets because everyone who buys one of your products, and I'm preaching to the choir here, obviously, because you're going to go like, yeah, duh, that's what I've been telling everyone. Everyone that buys your products, they're buying one of one, right? It's a collectible in itself. No matter what type of collectible you are making, in itself, it's a collectible because it's made by one guy in a basement, and you probably don't do the same thing twice, or at least exactly the same, right?
It's never the same, which is hard when somebody wants to order what I call a short run, which is up to 100 pieces of something. And that does happen occasionally. But I'm like, you'll get 100. They'll be similar. They'll be from the same family.
Right.
But I'm not saying it's not. They're not clones, because it is really hard to, especially when handcrafting, it's really hard to duplicate exactly.
Sure. To me, that's very authentic, as opposed to, someone that made a mold, injection molded something, and had some children with tiny fingers paint and, whatever goes on in
Right.
certain parts of the world. Did Gamify Business begin as a deliberate company? It sounds like it kind of did because you looked at alternatives, but or did it grow naturally out of conversations with other creatives who were struggling with the business side?
Gamify itself started off with a conversation with one particular client. Now, before that, I had spent about 6 years offering, coaching and consulting, and specifically to other creatives. I was on a platform called Twitch, which is a live streaming platform. I didn't game; I just did art. And so I had a 3-camera system set up there, and I would make my stuff about 6 to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and I'd do it in front of live people. And constantly being asked, well, how did you make it as a creative? Like, how do I figure out what to charge? Like all the things that business people know, but creatives don't understand fully. And so I would give those answers, but I'd give them in very businessy terms. And what would happen is a lot of people would be like, that's great advice, and then do nothing with it. But I was working with one particular client, and they're big gaming nerds. I'm a big gaming nerd. And I was talking to them about business. They had been in business already for 13 years, but they were struggling at this end. And they were like, either we get help or we close. And so I was doing a face-to-face. I'd actually driven out to Salt Lake City to meet them. And we were talking, and I had asked them some questions, and I realized that they really had no idea how to handle business. And so I was looking around their place, and I saw all these like gaming references. So I thought to myself, why don't we play a game? So I told them, I said, tomorrow I'm going to come back and we're going to play Dungeons and Dragons Business Edition, because I knew that they were really into that. I was kind of into it. I said, but instead of playing a wizard and a rogue and a warrior, you're going to play your role in the business. And then I'm going to create encounters, monsters or traps, but these aren't going to be like dragons. They're going to be things that you're actually going to encounter when you run a business. And then what I want to do is I want to see how you, as the role in the business, would try to attack and conquer these. And we played for about 4 to 6 hours. And then at the end of it, the CEO of the business turned to me and goes, is this what business is? Because if it is, I think I finally understand it, and it seems fun. And I went, there we go. That's the idea.
Light bulb. Yeah.
Exactly. So then I took that home, and within 6 months, I had created the first book, which is the Player's Handbook to Business. And that it's basically how to create a business plan, but done so through gaming. So we start out with character sheets. Then we have a mission that we have to accomplish. We look for a group. Then we go for funding. Then we fight some monsters and a whole 9 yards. So when you're done with that book, which is self-led or I can teach it, it basically gives you a working business plan and then a 6-month like task list that allows you to start earning real world money with the business that you created.
Now that was your first book. You have another book, at least one other book, with the best
5,
title
yeah.
in the world, with the best 5. Well, one of them has the best title in the world, which we'll get to in a minute.
Sure.
There's the hook. Stay tuned. Don't leave, because you will be amazed at this title. You say that many creatives don't really lack business ability, but they need business concepts presented differently. What does traditional business education often get wrong for creative entrepreneurs?
It's all about how your mind works. I have ADD. My son has ADHD, and a lot of creatives that I know are also kind of either on the spectrum or they have a bit of ADD or OCD.
My daughter likes to tell me regularly that there's a reason ADD and Dad have the same letters, because I am also. I think that is fairly common with entrepreneurs because we are always chasing the shiny object in the corner, right? Always.
We are.
And
it's a superpower with its own kryptonite built in, is what it is.
100%. I was my ADD or my OCD. Name any page out of the DSM. Entrepreneurs are in there somewhere. Was both my propeller and my anchor. Both. Yeah. Like you said, the kryptonite, superpower and kryptonite, all in one.
Yeah.
So what do creative people get wrong?
So with creative people, we don't think linearly. I like to classify people as two schools of thought: thinking linearly or thinking like a cloud. And the cloud is very much like that bowl I described earlier. A, B, F, squirrel, tree. We're all over the place. And entrepreneurs have to be because they wear so many hats. But with business, the way that we teach business in business schools is very linear. There's a process to everything. The problem is the creative mind gets bored really easily. And if a task seems difficult, it will be put away and forgotten about or gotten to later. And it's always the slog that they don't want to do. It's the dragon they don't want to face. And so what I did with Gamify is, instead of making everything linear, we actually approach it from a point of view that kind of jumps all over the place. We don't do the same tasks repeated. We make things different, fun, and more like an adventure with like micro wins and rewards that allow somebody who's got a mind that flutters all over the place to be able to accomplish something. It sounds chaotic, but the reality is for a chaotic mind, it's very much what we do.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I'm in the tech world, and we build manufacturing equipment for the electronics industry, which is a very nerdy, down the rabbit hole, PhD-laden world. And I consider myself a creative, even though, when people are born, they either have a left brain or a right brain mentality. I was either blessed or cursed with a 50-50 percentage of each. And so I can get really down rabbit hole, super technical, super nerdy, but I can also do really silly, creative things that my industry has never seen before or rarely seen before. So when I present at a conference, I travel the world and speak regularly, and my presentations are sometimes viewed as clownish because, I don't go as far deep as everyone else goes. My goal is to present something that will be received and remembered. And fortunately, the bar is so low in my industry, I don't even have to get that creative to stand out, right? So,
Sure.
So, I can tell jokes, I throw video, I have these crazy animations, I have music in my technical, stuff. And I can't tell you how many people will come up to me after the Q&A when it's safe. No one's listening. They'll hit me up in a hallway, and they'll look to the left and they'll look to the right and they'll go, "Thank you." I'm like, "Oh, thanks for what?" It's the first time I actually understand this concept of what you're talking about. Thank you. And to me, that's the win. It's not it's not how much I know. It's what's received. And I think so many people in my space just want to impress the audience as to how smart they are. And they are very smart. The degrees prove it. But how much of that is transferred to the recipient? Very little. Right. And so I totally appreciate the creative side to building a business. And I also totally appreciate how frustrating I am to work with, and probably you too.
Yes.
I'm guessing because we creative types, and particularly entrepreneur creator types, we can never work a regular job again. The toothpaste is out of the tube; it's not going back, and we'd be fired in the first 6 seconds because we don't do stupid. We cut corners sometimes. The fastest, the fastest. A to B is a straight line, and we'll just do straight lines everywhere. And we can be bull in china shops and things like that. And it's really all about the creative process where I get my thrills. And what I had to force myself to do was complete things, because I would be halfway through something in my zone, loving it. And then I'd see another shiny object and I'd be like, "Ooh." Yeah. And my team would have to follow me around with like this metaphorical dustpan and throw away, half-assed projects or force me to complete them. And, I get my kicks out of the initial creation, the initial idea, and starting to lay it out. And then I can sometimes get bored with the details and move on. And I'll bet that is something that you see with your clients also, right? It's not how many ideas they have, it's how many ideas they can finish. And
that's the thing. Ideation is a huge part of the creative process. And most creatives that I run into love ideation. They hate fulfillment.
Yes.
Or the creation aspect of it. And like you said, you'll get to 75% and be like, somebody else can take this over. We've got the gist. I've worked out all the bugs. You figure it out. And then I want to move on to the next thing. Yeah. That's absolutely the mindset of a creative. I'm 100%.
Yeah. how does I like the term, I think you came up with this term. How does gamification help someone understand business more clearly?
I'd love to say that I came up with that term, but it has been around a while.
Okay.
I did make up this word, though, gamify, apparently, because every dictionary is like, that's not a real word. But with gamification, how it helps is that as kids, we start playing games. And what we understand with every new game that we play, there's a whole new rule set. And we've got to work within these rule sets to be able to play and complete this game, to win. And we've been doing it from board games to hide and seek to video games, all these really complicated processes that we do now. And so our minds are geared to be able to jump into that and understand the process so that we can play the game, because we want to figure it out. We want to know how it works so that we can beat it. The thing is then we jump back into the real world, into our real job, our businesses that we're running, and we completely forget that the rules that are being made, we're making, and we've got to stay within them, but the parameters can be loose and worked within, pushed on. And so what gamification does is it says, okay, these are the parameters. These are the parameters you're setting up, and I'm going to let you know that these are the rules that we have to follow. How are we going to beat this game? And the rules can constantly change, but the mentality stays the same, because instead of being like, I don't know what I'm doing with business, I'm just jumping into it. Like the question that you asked me at the very beginning, it's like, did you know? Like, I had no idea. But if somebody came to you and said, okay, these are the rules you have to play by in this game that you're making up because it's your idea, but I'm going to set the guardrails for you. How do you succeed in this? Then it basically takes some of that pressure off of you as the creative, because now you're not only like making stuff up as you go along. You're like, I've got parameters I can stick around, and they're using the same skill sets that we learned with all these games that we played in the past. And so all of this kind of clicks in our head, and like, I get it now. And then we're now playing the game as opposed to trying to create the rules, create the world, create the characters, create the setting and the product and sell it, all these other things. We're like, nope, this is the rules I'm playing in, and I just run.
Give me an example of how you would explain things like pricing, marketing, or client management through your game-based framework.
So one that I love to use right off the bat is ROAS. Everybody knows what that is, but I love talking to creatives about it because I always think it's rodents of unusual size from The Princess Bride. But the real, it's return on ad spend. And like a lot
only
of
a gamer would come up with the alternative.
Right. No, well, nerds are nerds. We stick together.
Or classic forever B movie material, Princess Bride. Yeah,
exactly.
100%.
Right. So with return on ad spend, the way that I frame it is, okay, so imagine you have an adventuring team, and you walk into a brand new town, and in the middle of the town square, there's a bulletin board, and it's got a lot of wanted posters, but it also has like other teams that come in, and they are allowed to sell their services to help you rid all the wanted posters that are there. So you're like, oh, sweet, we're in a great spot. So, your guy unrolls his scroll with your guys' information on it and starts to tack it up there, and a guy runs out of the main building. He's like, hey, no. I actually run this board here. You've got to pay me a gold piece a month to be able to put your information on there. And you're like, okay, sure. So you throw them a gold piece, you tack it up there, you wait a month, you get 5 or 6 gigs. They've paid you way more than a gold piece. You're happy. You're happy to pay that guy a gold piece every single month. Okay. Well, also the opposite is true. Okay. You pay a gold piece, you put the sign up there. After a month, no business has come through. You're out a gold piece. Do you stick around and keep putting gold into that piece? No, you don't. That's your return on ad spend. That guy that you're paying right there is the ad that you're putting in, while you're putting it up there. Now are you getting enough return on investment on that? Is that gold piece enough? Now, what if that guy was charging you 50 gold pieces and you can make, thousands of gold pieces doing these jobs? That's the best market to be in. Once they see that, they're like, okay, so I get it now. So I have to spend that money to be able to let people know that my business exists. And then if it's successful, keep paying it. If it's not successful, stop paying it. Yes, that's the return on ad spend. There's your ROAS. That's a great example.
Yeah. Going back to something you said earlier, that instead of concentrating on what you make, you concentrate on the artisan side of that. Someone told me, a mentor of mine told me many years ago, if you want to sell more product, stop talking about your product. And that
Correct.
made absolutely no sense to me. My mentor, I affectionately, although she doesn't see it as a term of endearment, but I refer to her as Yoda, just not to her face, because you know how Yoda kind of speaks like he's dyslexic, you know?
Yep.
Idea good that you must have, you know, that type of stuff. What she would say to me over the course of several years would make no sense in the moment. And I'm like, what do you mean? I mean, we're all about the product. We sell machines, right? We got to talk about the machines. No. At one point, I got really frustrated with our own marketing. We were braggadocious. We were chest thumping. You know, ours is the best. Everyone else's suck was pretty much the mantra of our ads. And she told me that once, and it took a couple years for that to kind of land in my world. And one day we just switched cold turkey to something I coined, but it turned out it had already been coined, right? Like gamification, right? I mean, that's your term, but someone else beat you to it. And I refer to it as conscious marketing, which has a term already established, and it's pretty much matches my version of it. And that is to create value, right? So instead of talking about our machines, which landed on deaf ears, frankly, we started talking about the reasons why someone would get a machine like what ours does without even talking about our product. Our machines solve a very specific problem in the electronics industry, which is a pretty big problem. But the engineers that are facing the problem have no idea what the source of that problem is. Therefore, me talking about the horsepower of our pumps and the CFM of our blowers and the wattage of our heaters would not land anywhere. There's no point of reference. But when we switched over to value-based conscious marketing and education, our sales soared. And not only did our sales soar, the type of customer we attracted was far higher caliber. When we concentrated on chest-thumping ads and accolades and awards we've won, we attracted, in many cases, not in every case, but in many cases, toxic customers who were just looking for, they'd start every conversation with, how much is it? Now, we're 20 questions in before someone goes, oh, sorry, by the way, I should ask, how much is it? It's not a leading question anymore. And I think that change in philosophy and approach and communication style created an authority, which, and I hate this word, and I say this all the time on this show, I hate this word, but it allowed us to be an influencer within our space, but not a celebrity TikTok twerky influencer, but a authority-based influencer. And today, people will reach out to me. My industry knows who I am. They'll reach out to me and ask me questions that are not even in my wheelhouse. I have no idea, but they trust that I will connect them with someone who does know the idea, right? And know what they're talking about. So I love that philosophy you had of changing the communication to the artistry, the uniqueness, the authenticness, as opposed to whatever widget, statue, whatever you're making for somebody. Rather than talk about the size and the shape and the dimensions and the shipping weight and how much it costs, you're selling yourself more than you're selling a product, which to me, that's the definition of conscious marketing. Did you have that same realization at the time? Did it seem odd to do that? Was it counterintuitive at first?
I think, yeah, absolutely. It feels counterintuitive because you're like, I'm trying to sell a thing. I'm not for sale.
Right.
I'm trying to sell a thing.
Right.
What it did is it actually caused me, I do a lot of retrospect. I like to think back on all the things that it's like, was this apparent or was this new? And what I realized is that when I was in college, the stories that stuck with me, the lessons that stuck with me were done through storytelling that had nothing to do with the textbook. Yeah. And it's the same thing with the product. I'm selling these products and after a while, what I realized was that there's a psychology in it. It's actually a chemical thing in our brain. When we just talk about the product, the brain naturally does it's comparison shopping. We basically see an object and we go, oh, that's a lot like this other one that I saw. Mm-hmm. And now we're comparing it. And from a creative point of view, that's really bad because if I'm like saying I'm selling paintings, for instance, or sculptures, if I'm putting that in front of you, and it's like, oh, I've seen a sculpture before. I know I can go and get a sculpture for $9 off of Amazon. Now, you can't get the one that I made for $9. I'm going to charge you thousands of dollars. Well, why would I do that when I can get this cheap one over here? And because they're comparing them. Yeah. But once we stop saying, hey, this is the object that you want to buy. And we start actually saying, what you're doing is you're actually supporting me. I'm solving a problem for you, which is one of the reasons you do it, or you're helping to support the artisan behind it. Then people aren't investing in a thing; they're investing in the person, they're investing in the knowledge, they're investing in a lot more. And like you said, the cost isn't the first thing that comes to mind, because they're understanding the value that's in there. And then it's never a question of how much does it cost, is that cost worth the value I get out of it, as opposed to, am I just buying a thing? What's that thing worth? And so, yes. And so it was definitely eye-opening for me. It was a lesson that took a while to fully grasp and understand. But then once I did, I started noticing that was a recurring theme in my life. It's like, oh, this has happened a lot over and over again. I just wasn't really aware of it and looking for it consciously. But once I did, I was like, that's why, we were watching a Budweiser commercial and they got the Clydesdales in there. They don't ever show the beer in that, but it pulls on our heartstrings, or the puppies or whatever. We're like, oh, that's, I love that. The polar bears from Coca-Cola, it has nothing to do with the product,
Right.
But they're pulling on our heartstrings. It's emotional resonance. And that is really the thing that's going to help to sell the product, as opposed to buy my stuff.
Oh, look at Nike. They're the poster child for that type of stuff. Clydesdales, Budweiser, a great example as well. But, Nike, you'll never see an ad that talks about the comfort of their shoe, or the arch support, or the design, or, how grippy the soles are, the treads are. In fact, some of their ads don't even show a shoe. They celebrate athleticism, and people connect with athleticism. And to me, the hallmark of getting your brand into the consciousness of the public is the fact that people will wear. I own T-shirts with a swoosh on it. I have a baseball cap, a white baseball cap with a black swoosh on it. I'm advertising their brand. They don't make the baseball caps, right? But I do think that people today, particularly younger generations, they don't just buy product, they join tribes. And if you could be one of those few brands, Coca-Cola, to a certain degree Patagonia, and maybe to a slightly lesser degree now, but Apple, Apple started off celebrating creators. They didn't talk about gigabytes and memory and all. They do now, unfortunately, but they basically, they're very effective ad, the crazy ones, those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world do change the world. And, that to me, the 1984 ad, the Orwell ad, they didn't ever mention a computer. I don't even think they showed a computer. At the very, very end, the last 5 seconds on screen, they showed the Apple logo. And that was it. And that, to me, is the most effective type of marketing, where it gets into the fabric of society. You mentioned Coca-Cola and the polar bear. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. It's a great anecdote. Coca-Cola in the 30s and 40s realized, they put so much emphasis on selling cold, refreshing drinks that their sales sucked during the wintertime. People that lived in cold climates didn't buy Coca-Cola. They bought it in the summer. And Coca-Cola went to their ad agency and said, we want to improve our sales, in the wintertime. So their ad agency thought about it, and they decided, let's create a vision of Santa Claus holding a bottle of Coke. And before the 20s and 30s, there was no universal image of Santa Claus. Santa Claus was, taken from St. Nicholas, who looked, quite frankly, if you see old portraits of St. Nicholas, kind of looked like a pedophile in rags. You'd grab your kid and pull him closer if you saw that character coming. You certainly wouldn't want to, stick your child on his lap at a mall, right? So they decided to make Santa's costume red, not just red, Coca-Cola red, and now that version of Santa is pretty much the only commercial version of Santa Claus, and that came from Coca-Cola. And I'm just thinking, if Pepsi had thought of that idea, Santas in malls might be dressed in blue, the Pepsi color. Yeah. But that is a great example. All those are great examples of conscious marketing. Where do you get your perseverance and your grit and your determination? Because I know, without even having to ask you, were there moments when you thought, okay, this isn't going to happen? Those probably occurred, at least briefly.
Oh, yeah.
It always does. I'm sure there's some unicorns out there that could say, oh, never had a doubt. But if you're a human,
Like to meet that
probably,
person.
yeah. I'd like to meet him too. Find out what he's drinking anyway.
Right.
But how do you, maybe have a failure and then just keep going back? Where do you get that determination from?
Well, first off, I love education. I love learning. I went to self-imposed year-round school for 10 years. Like I love to be in front of the education aspect of things. I love to learn. And it's that perseverance through that. But I also never look at failure as a stop. To me, failure is always a step. The scientific method is one that proves that over and over again. It's like when you are proven wrong, that's not a bad thing. That's proof that you're doing something correct. So failures are always steps to the next direction. So that's really where the perseverance comes from, is knowing that even if I messed up or I don't think that's going to succeed, I know that if I just keep pushing forward a little bit harder, then I'm going to be able to find that spark that allows me to move to the next one. So failures are always steps, not stops. The other thing is that it's the entertainment business. We always hear those stories about that actor who's like, I was just about to quit and I did one more audition and then I made it big or whatever. It's always there's, I was doing my last gig as a band and then Dave Matthews happened to be in the audience and he signed me that night. And that's how I became a multimillionaire. It's all of those stories of just that one more thing. Now you do have to be able to keep in your mind that, sometimes there is a sinking ship. I had a grad student or grad professor who used a horrible term, but she'd always say, sometimes you got to kill your babies. And it's true, and so you have to have enough self-awareness to understand when something has reached its conclusion and be okay with that. It's not a failure. You did it for as long as you could. But then on the ones where you're like, no, I think this thing has weight. And honestly, Gamify Business is a great example of this one, because to get its legs underneath it has been a struggle, because this is a new concept in a world that's constantly inundated with new concepts, especially with AI being around. Everybody's got some new great idea. So trying to get in there and really build the momentum that you want and think that it's going to have the legs and the breadth that you want it to have is a challenge. But I also know that if you stick with it just long enough, because it does have weight. No one's ever told me that this is a dumb idea. I've had business ideas where people are like, that's a dumb idea. Or with Pop-Out Furniture, which is laser die cut furniture, I was doing a trade show and the booth next to me had lasers for your basement. And I went, well, if everyone's doing this in our home, obviously they're not going to buy this one that I'm making, that I have a machine in New Jersey that's the size of a warehouse to do it for me. So, the writing was on the wall. Now, this philosophy I have in life called bend, don't break. And that's really where that comes into play. So you see that idea and you're like, oh crap, I'm done. No, don't break. I could stand rigid and say, I'm just going to go down with this ship and this is going to be the way it's going to be. Or you can bend a little bit and see where direction takes you. And that's really what I like about it. So with Gamify, when I had that first idea, I was like, okay, well, I'll just make campaigns. And I was like, no, it needs to be more than campaigns. So you just well, what's the thing that they really need to solve? This is the problem that they need to solve. And that's really what has caused me to figure out where to go with this business, is the bending to the needs of the customers, to the needs of the people that I'm trying to help. Because we only have so many great ideas and they only work really well for us. It's when you actually have to put it out there in the public and you got to understand what needs that they have to have fulfilled, that you get the full picture of what you're trying to do.
Yeah. What, well, let's talk about one of your books with the best title ever. Quit Selling Your Shit. That is a great title. I would buy the book just to find out what it's about. I mean, that's a very smart title. What's that about?
All right, so Quit Selling Your Shit is basically how product first selling is going to kill your creative business. That's literally what it is. We talked about this briefly earlier. When you put your product out there, when you say buy this, buy this, buy this, you're not going to be able to sell the product because of the comparison issue that we run into. But when we stop trying to sell our crap, our I call it shit, when we stop selling our shit and we start selling the person behind it, that's when you get the opportunity to really show people what it is that you're bringing to the table. It's not just the thing that you're making, it's the person behind it and the life that we've lived and the ability to touch humans emotionally like they need to be. That's what you're bringing to the table. So it's quit selling your shit, sell yourself. Now, what's interesting is I came out with that book, and that's right here. It's a Quit Selling Your Shit. It's right there. But
and I'll put an image. I'll put an image right up here of the book. Excellent. For my audience.
Thank you. But so the follow up to that was the sell yourself. So I actually have this other book over here called The Bard's Guide to Storycraft, because as we talked about earlier, story is the best way for people to relate to things and to remember your product. Nike did it. Coca-Cola does it. I do it as well. We all have a story that we keep in our back pocket when you go to a party and they're like, hey, Mike, tell us that story that you've got. We love that story. And you're like, okay, here we go. And you pull it out of your back pocket. There's actually psychology and chemistry that is involved in a good story. And being able to harness that information and tell it to people is going to be the way that you're really going to reach the masses and the markets that you want. I have a great example of this with a client that I was working with. She was an actuary and she had developed basically accounting software. And she was going to Google to basically get seed funding for it. And I was like, okay, let me hear your pitch. And she came in, she had all the spreadsheets, she had the numbers, she had every bit backed up. And I was like, that's really good information, but you're boring. Yeah. I said, tell me something I need to know. Like, where'd this come from? She's like, well, when I was a kid, I was helping my mom and dad with their construction company. And we noticed that everybody was, they'd give us cash or they'd give it, we pay it out. We didn't have a really good way of tracking it. So I developed this software so that everybody involved in the chain understood where the money went. I'm like, that's the story you lead with. Because how many other mom and pop construction companies are there in this country, in this world, that could use something like that? If you lead with just the numbers and the information, that's great stuff, but it's not going to carry the weight that a good story will. And so that's why I quit selling your shit, sell yourself. Those two books go together. It's a great package deal, which is why I sell them in a package.
Yeah, very good. Last question, because we're about out of time. How did you define success before you started your own business, and how do you define it now?
Success before I started my own business was money, house, kids, happiness. That was because that's what we had been taught growing up. Sure. The way that I define it now is comfort and happiness. I hate the 5/7 rule. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's working 5 days to enjoy the last 2 at the end. I think that's the dumbest way to live your life, because you're ruining 5/7 of your life. Yeah. I live every day to have fun and enjoy myself. I'm a 7/7 kind of guy. So for me, success is being able to live 7 out of 7 days, to have enough comfort that I'm not constantly worried about where's the next bill going to be paid, or where's that next. It's being in that level of comfort that I can spend the time with my kids. If I need to take a day off to go watch my kids' game, I can go do that without the fear of my entire business collapsing around me. So success now, and I'm also 50, so that, it helps with some retrospection there. Yeah, sure. That, it's the time that you have to do the things that you love, not the things that you have to do. That's really the measure of success for me.
Yeah. A lot of people have asked me over the years, what's your exit strategy? I'm like, I really don't have one, because to me, it's all about the journey. I'm having the time of my life in the journey of my business. I don't want I really don't think of a destination. I don't want it to be over. No. I'm enjoying every single day. I'm in the zone. Now, that wasn't the case when I first started the business. It was hell,
right.
Constant stress. But now, 34 years into it, I'm in the zone. And every day is magical. I get to create, which I love to do. My team loves the details, which they love. They don't like to create. They like to facilitate. Yeah. It's a perfect partnership between myself and my team. And we keep ourselves isolated enough that I don't drive them too crazy. And I don't watch over their shoulder and go, oh, this way, that way. We each do what we love to do, and it's perfect. To my audience who wants to get more information on Gamify Business, if you're watching this on YouTube, look right down here where it says see more. The URL for the business will be there, as will the Amazon link to quit selling your shit. And I'll look up the other books that you've written. That's one of 5, I think you said. So I'll have those books listed. If I can find them on Amazon, I'll put the links there as well. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, just go to that podcast app and that information will be there in the show notes. Paul, thank you so much for being my guest. There's 2 types of time. There's real time and there's podcast time. And podcast time is like 10x. It just happens like that. But thanks for taking this what seems to be way too brief a time and sharing your journey with me and the advice from Gamify Business. I really appreciate it. And continued success to you, Paul.
I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you so much. And, thank you for letting me be on your show and to, sharing a slice of wisdom. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it.
All right, here's some final thoughts. Paul's story reminds us that many entrepreneurs don't begin with a business plan. They begin with a talent, a craft, a creative instinct, or a desire to build something meaningful. But eventually, every creative person who turns that talent into a business faces the same realization. The work and the business of the work are not the same thing. Being a great artist, designer, maker, or fabricator is just one part of the equation. Learning how to price, market, communicate value, manage clients, and build a sustainable business is another. What I appreciate about Paul's approach is that he doesn't ask creatives to become someone they're not. Instead, he translates business into a language they can understand. Through Gamify Business, he helps creative entrepreneurs see business less as an intimidating set of rules and more as a game they can learn, play, and improve. And that's a valuable lesson for all entrepreneurs. Success often depends not only on what we create, but how well we learn the business behind what we create. Now, that is a wrap. Thanks for being part of our Reluctant Entrepreneur family. We've been very busy recording future episodes with fascinating guests, so be sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make a great guest, we'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com where you can apply or recommend a guest or just learn more about the show. And a couple of shameless plugs. I've started a new series under the Reluctant Entrepreneur brand. The new series is called Reluctant Lessons When Businesses Went Wrong. On this series, we dig into high-profile business failures and the stories behind it all. So far, we've profiled numerous companies, including Rubbermaid, Kodak, Blockbuster, BlackBerry, Toys R Us, DeLorean Motor Company, remember them, and others with many more to come. It turns out there's no shortage. Check them out on this channel. And if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon and as an audiobook on both Audible and Amazon. And finally, to everyone listening or watching, if you find yourself stepping into entrepreneurship, whether by choice or by circumstance, remember this. Sometimes the path we never planned becomes the journey we were meant to take. Thanks so much for being here. I truly appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.